Sa video lecture na ito, pag-uusapan natin ang accrued interest ni investor. So, nasa investment pa rin tayo. Dahil nasa investment pa rin tayo, nasa books pa rin tayo ng investor. Alright? Sa books ng investor, ito ay ang kanyang investment account. At sa books naman ng investee, ito naman ang kanyang bonds payable. So, ang benefit ni investor sa pag-i-invest niya ng kanyang money sa investee ay itong tinatawag na interest. So, si investee, nagbabayad siya ng interest sa investor. On the part of the investor, ito ang kanyang interest income. And on the part of the investee, ito naman ang kanyang interest expense. So, ang pagbabayad ni investee ng interest kay investor ay pwedeng annually, that means yearly, pwedeng semi-annually or every 6 months, quarterly means every 3 months, and monthly is every month. Most of the time, sa problems na mai-encounter mo ay semi-annually or annually. So, ano nga ba itong accrued interest? Ang accrued interest is, ito yung na-earn mo na, pero hindi mo pa nare-receive. So, paano nga ba yung accrued interest? Ganito yan. So, ang pag-acquire ng bonds na ito ay pwede nating i-acquire on interest date or in between the interest date. Sa pag-acquire ng bond investment ni investor, ay pwede niyang i-acquire ito on the interest date or in between the interest dates. So, kapag in-acquire niya ito on the interest date, walang accrued interest itong si investor na babayaran. Kapag in-acquire naman niya ito in between the interest dates, dyan nagkakaroon ng accrued interest na babayaran si investor kay investee. So, on interest date, ang purchase price niya ng bonds ni investee ay equal to the acquisition cost of the bonds. And in between the interest dates naman siya, ang purchase price niya is composed of the acquisition cost of the bonds plus the accrued interest. So, ano nga ba itong accrued interest? Ang accrued interest, ito yung na-earn na, hindi pa ito nare-receive. Unahin muna natin ang pag-acquire ng bonds na ito ni investor on interest dates. Paano nga ba natin ina-account o paano ang accounting kapag nag-acquire si investor on interest dates? Ganito yan. So, unahin muna natin ang pag-acquire ni investor, the bondholder, on interest date. So, for example, we have a face amount of the bond of 1 million. Ang face amount, yan ang nakasaad sa bond certificate na amount. Ang face amount, yan ang babayaran ni investee pagdating ng maturity date kay investor. Then, we have our nominal interest rate of 12%. The interest payment, sa example natin, ay semi-annually, and the payment will be January 1st at July 1st. Yan ang interest payment ni investee kay investor. Then, let's say for example, itong practice questions natin, ang acquisition cost natin ay 1 million. The face amount is 1 million and the acquisition cost is 1 million. Anong ibig sabihin nun? Si investor, in-acquire niya at face amount. So, hindi niya ito in-acquire more than the face amount or less than the face amount. Yan ang pag pag-uusapan natin pagdating natin sa amortizations of premium and discount. Dito sa practice questions na ito, para ma-simplify natin kung ano ba itong accrued interest na ito at kung paano natin ina-account kapag nag-acquire si investor ng bonds, isi-simplify lang natin na ang acquisition cost is equal to the face amount. So let's say for example, pinurchase ni investor ang bonds na ito on January 1st, which is on the interest date. And on interest dates, ang purchase price natin is equal to the acquisition cost of your bonds. Wala siyang accrued interest. Pag-uusapan natin yan in a little bit, yung in between the interest dates. So on the interest date, on the purchase date, on January 1, our entry is debit to the investment in bonds of 1 million and credit to the cash of 1 million. Alright, so walang accrued interest yan na binayaran ni investor. Alright, on the interest date on July 1st, the semi-annual interest ni si investee magbabayad ng 6 months ng interest kay investor. So, nung tinanggap ni investor ang interest na yan, ang entry niya is debit to cash. Kung magkano man yung cash na ni-receive niya, and the 6 months or the semi-annual payment or interest payment of the investee is equal to the face amount of 1 million multiplied by nominal interest rate of 12% multiplied by 6/12 kasi 6 months lang ang na-earn niya. Alright? 6 months lang. So, we have a cash of 60,000. So, ang entry natin nung tinanggap ni investor ang interest from the investee for the 6 months or the semi-annual payment is debit to cash of 60,000 and credit to interest income of 60,000. And on the financial statement date, which is December 31st, so, kapag mag-prepare na siya ng kanyang financial statement, meron siyang accrued interest. Ano ba yung accrued interest? Ito yung na-earn na niya pero hindi pa niya nare-receive. Yung magmula July 1st to December 31st. As of December 31st, magiging accrued interest receivable niya. Magiging receivable niya from the investee. The following day, which is January 1st, diyan na niya matatanggap ang interest from the investee. But as of the date of the financial statement, hindi pa niya natatanggap. Itong pero na-earn na niya as interest income. Kasi lumipas na yung panahon. Lumipas na yung days. Na-earn na niya po yun. Hindi pa nga lang niya nare-receive. Kailan ba niya marireceive? On January 1st. Kasi yan po ang interest dates natin. So, as of this date, kapag nag-prepare ng financial statement, si investor, meron siyang accrued interest na 6 months. Okay? Na-earn na niya, pero hindi pa niya nare-receive. So, anong magiging entry natin or adjusting journal entry natin dito sa December 31st? Our adjusting journal entry will be debit to accrued interest receivable on December 31st, our adjusting journal entry is debit to accrued interest receivable of 60,000 and credit to the interest income of 60,000. Yan po yung na-earn na niya pero hindi pa niya nare-receive. Kaya, i-adjust natin yan as of the financial statement date. The computation is 1 million times the nominal interest rate times 6/12. So, on January 1st, ang magiging entry niya pag na-receive niya yung interest na manggagaling kay investee is debit to the cash of 60,000 and credit to the accrued interest receivable of 60,000 kasi na-receive na nga po niya. So, wala na siyang receivable. Itong accrued interest receivable, that is your current asset kasi marireceive mo siya within a year. So, current asset po siya. The alternative of this on January 1, nire-reverse po yung accrued interest receivable. Ang magiging entry niya kapag ni-reverse niya ang accrued interest receivable is debit to the interest income of 60,000 and credit to accrued interest receivable. Reversal entry po yon. Then, kapag na-receive niya yung interest from the investee, ang kanyang magiging entry is debit to cash of 60,000 and credit to interest income of 60,000. So, parang wala ring effect sa interest income mo yon. Dahil dinebit mo yung interest income, credit mo din siya nung ni-receive mo. So, ganito po ang ating on interest date. Ina-account natin on interest date, debit our investment in bonds of 1 million kasi yan ang acquisition cost natin. Remember, ang laman ng investment in bonds mo kung magkano mo binili ang bond na yon. Then, we credit our cash of 1 million. The interest date is semi-annually, January 1st and July 1st. So, nung July 1st, nakatanggap si investor ng income from the investee. Ang kanyang entry is debit to cash of 60,000 and credit to interest income of 60,000, which is calculated as 1 million. The 1 million is the face amount of the bonds multiplied by 12% times the 6/12, which is 6 months lang. And then on December 31st, kapag mag-prepare na si investor ng kanyang financial statement, meron na siyang na-earn na interest income from these bonds, mag-a-adjust siya ngayon ng interest income niya. So, ang kanyang adjusting journal entry on December 31st is debit to the accrued interest receivable of 60,000 and credit to the interest income of 60,000. So, kung titingnan mo, the whole year, ang na-earn niyang interest income, which is 1 million times 12% times 1 year. And that is 120,000 interest income. So, paano naman itong in between the interest date? Ganito yan. In-acquire ni investor or ng bondholder ang bonds na ito in between this interest dates. So, same problem tayo sa ating on interest dates. We have our face amount of 1 million, nominal interest rate of 12%, semi-annual ang pagbabayad ng interest ni investee kay investor, which is paid on January 1 at July 1 ang interest dates niya. At ang acquisition cost niya ay 1 million. Alright, remember, mga investor ay pwede nilang i-acquire or i-purchase itong bonds na ito ng mas mataas sa face amount or mas mababa pa sa face amount. To simplify this practice questions, ang acquisition cost natin will be equal to our face amount. Para simple lang siya. So, our interest dates are January 1st and July 1st. So, let's say, for example, pinurchase ni investor itong bonds na ito on March 1st. Let's say, for example, the investor purchased these bonds on March 1st. That is in between the interest dates. Pagdating ng interest date na July 1st, si investor makakatanggap siya ng 6 months of interest from the investee. Pero yung 6 months na yon, na-earn ba ni investor? So, kung titingnan mo itong interest dates natin na January 1st up to your purchase date of March 1st, that is 2 months. And between the purchase date up to the next interest date is 4 months. So, in-acquire ni investor itong bonds na ito on March 1st. That's our purchase date. The next interest date, which is the July 1st, si investor ay tatanggap ng 6 months na interest, worth of interest kay investee. Alright. So, yung 6 months na yun, na-earn ba ni investor? Hindi. Ang na-earn lang niya is from the purchase date nung in-acquire niya yung bonds na yon up to the interest date, which is 4 months. So, anong nangyari sa 2 months? On the purchase date, itong 2 months na ito, yan ang tinatawag natin accrued interest. Alright? Yan ang accrued interest na babayaran ni investor to the investee. Parang i-advance na niya po yung 2 months na yan. Dahil pagdating ng July 1st, 6 months po ang lang ang tatanggapin niya. Pero out of that 6 months na tinanggap niya, ang na-earn lang talaga niya is 4 months. So, paano natin ina-account ito? So, ang purchase price natin of the bonds is equal to the acquisition cost plus the accrued interest na 2 months. Paano na ba natin ito ina-account? So, on purchase date, which is March 1st, in-acquire ni investor ang bonds na ito, our acquisition of the bonds is 1 million. Babayaran niya ang 2 months na accrued interest. So, ang purchase price niya ngayon sa bonds na yon on March 1st is equal to the acquisition cost plus the accrued interest. Right? So, ilalagay ko dito ang computations. Alright, so the computations of our acquisitions in between this interest date on March 1st is 1 million ang acquisition cost niya ng bonds na yon plus the accrued interest na 2 months. Calculated as the 1 million face amount multiplied by 12% times 2 over 12 kasi 2 months lang siya. So, mayroon tayong accrued interest na 20,000. Ang magiging entry natin ngayon on March 1st is debit to the investment in bonds, which is the acquisition cost of 1 million, and debit to the accrued interest receivable of 20,000. So, ang magiging entry natin ngayon is debit to the investment in bonds na 1 million. Yan ang acquisition cost niya sa bonds na yon. Then, we debit our accrued interest receivable of 20,000. Yan yung 2 months na in advance niya dahil on the interest date, 6 months ang marireceive niya from the investee. And then, we credit the total purchase price of 1,020,000 na cash. Another way of accounting this, debit to the investment in bonds. There's another way na i-record itong transactions na ito. We debit our investment in bonds of 1 million, which is the acquisition cost, and we debit interest income instead na accrued interest receivable. And then we credit our cash of 1,020,000. Pagdating ng July 1st, kung saan si investee magbabayad siya ng 6 months interest kay investor. Nung tinanggap ngayon ni investor ang 6 months worth of interest kay investee, ganito niya in-entry, ang magiging journal entry niya nung tinanggap niya yung 6 months worth of interest is debit to cash of 60,000. So, nung purchase date, ganito ang entry ni investor. Nung tinanggap niya ang 6 months worth of interest kay investee, ang magiging entry niya is debit to cash of 60,000, which is calculated as 1 million face amount times 12% times 6 over 12. Kasi that's the semi-annual, 6 months. Then, we credit the accrued interest receivable of 20,000. Isasara na natin yung account na yan kasi yan po yung 2 months na accrued interest. And then, we credit our interest income of 40,000. So, kung titignan mo dito sa accounting na ito, ang kanyang interest income lang talaga is 40,000. And that is the 4 months from the purchase date up to July 1st na interest date natin. Kapag ganito naman niya in-enter nung purchase date, dinebit niya ang investment in bonds, dinebit niya ang interest income, and credit niya ang cash. Ang magiging entry niya nung tinanggap niya yung 6 months from the investee is debit to the cash of 60,000 and we credit the interest income of 60,000. Ang magiging entry niya ngayon kapag ito ang ginawa niyang entry nung pinurchase niya is debit to the cash of 60,000 and credit to the interest income of 60,000. So, we debit our cash of 60,000 and we credit our interest income of 60,000. So, kung makikita mo dito, nakaabang na yung debit na interest income na 20,000. So, at the end, kung titingnan mo yung T account natin, So, kung titingnan mo yung T-account mo ng interest income, dito sa accounting na ito, nakaabang na yung debit ng interest income na mababawas sa interest income na 60,000. So, at the end, parehas din lang siya ng interest income na mare-recognize ni investor. Kapag ganito ang kanyang accounting, ang interest income niya ay still 40,000. So, there's two ways paano natin i-account o paano natin i-journalize itong ating acquisition of our bonds on the purchase date. We can debit the accrued interest receivable or we can debit the interest income. Okay? Most of the time, ang ginagamit nila itong debit of the interest income. And then, kapag na-receive na niya yung 6 months, i-credit lang niya yung the whole 6 months of interest income. At the end, yung interest income na T-account mo, nakaabang na yung debit na 20,000, then we credit 60,000. So, ang interest income din ni investor ay 4 months from the purchase date up to the interest date. So, on the financial statement date this time, kapag mag-prepare na ng financial statement, si investor, magkakaroon siya ng accrued interest. Ano itong accrued interest naman na i-adjust ni investor sa kanyang financial statement? From the July 1st up to the December 31st, yan po ay 6 months. Alright? Kailan niya matatanggap yung 6 months na na-earn na niya na interest income? Tatanggapin niya yung na-earn niyang interest income from July 1 to December 31st on the next interest date na January 1st, the following day. But as of this date, hindi pa niya natatanggap yon. Kaya mag-a-adjust ngayon si investor na tinatawag nilang accrued interest receivable, the 6 months. So, on December 31st, ang ating adjusting journal entry for this 6 months of accrued interest, yung na-earn na niya pero hindi pa niya natatanggap as of this date. Kailan niya tatanggapin on the next interest date? As of December 31st, ang kanyang adjusting journal entry is debit to the accrued interest receivable of 60,000, which is a 6 months worth of interest income, and then credit to interest income. So, yan ang adjusting journal entry ni investor on December 31st kapag mag-prepare na siya ng financial statement niya. So, we debit accrued interest receivable of 60,000 and we credit the interest income of 60,000. And that is calculated as So, yan po ang adjusting journal entry ni investor sa 6 months na na-earn na niya pero hindi pa niya nare-receive. Marireceive lang niya ito on the following interest date, which is January 1st. Alright? But as of December 31st, mag-recognize siya ng accrued interest receivable of 60,000. The 6 months worth of interest income ni investor. Then, we credit our interest income of 60,000. So, dito sa practice questions na ito, ang interest income na na-earn niya is from March 1st up to December 31st, which is 4 months plus 6 months, 10 months po yan, worth of interest income. So, kung ang tanong sa problem mo is, how much is the interest income earned by the investor? 10 months po yan. You don't need to journalize kapag ang tinatanong lang ay yung amount ng interest income. Pwede ring itanong sa problem mo kung magkano ang accrued interest receivable ni investor at the end of the year. Ang answer mo doon ay 60,000. And always remember, ang amount na nilalagay natin sa ating investment account, which is investment in bonds, kung magkano yung acquisition cost ng bonds na yon. Hindi kasali ang accrued interest. Another thing that I want you to be mindful of or babantayan mo when it comes to solving a problem in investment in bonds, sa pag-acquire ng bonds na yan in between the interest dates. Kapag sinabi ng problem, included na ang accrued interest, aalisin mo yung accrued interest sa purchase price na yan para makita mo kung magkano talaga ang acquisition cost ni investor sa bonds na yon. Babantayan mo din yung word na excluded. Ang ibig sabihin, hindi siya kasama. So, i-add mo siya. Ang ibig sabihin, hindi siya kasama. So, you have to be mindful of of the words included, excluded, or yung word na plus. So, i-analyze mo itong mabuti. Kung included ba or excluded yung accrued interest sa amount na yon or hindi. Diyan mo babantayan kung magkano talaga ang acquisition cost ng bonds na yon ni investor. Kasi yung acquisition cost lang ng bonds na yon ang ilalagay mo sa account ng investment in bonds. Yan ang tip ko sa iyo. So, ganito po ang ating acquisitions of the bonds in between the interest dates at saka on interest dates. Kapag on interest dates, madali lang yon. Alright? Wala tayong accrued interest. Nagkakaroon lang tayo ng accrued interest kapag mag-prepare na si investor at the end of the year. Magkakaroon siya ng accrued interest. Nagkakaroon lang ng komplikado kapag ang acquisitions of the bonds is in between the interest dates. In between the interest dates, nagkakaroon ng accrued interest receivable or nagdi-debit ng interest income si investor aside from the acquisitions of the investment in bonds. Ito po ang ating acquisitions of the bonds with the accrued interest. I'll see you on my next video.